evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
Or good morning, whatever it is that you're watching this. I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Joining me for today's discussion is my friend and most frequent collaborator on the channel.
Collaborate
And listen, Talmadge Varnado III.
Great to be back.
Indubitably great to have you back, Talmadge.
I've been here for hours, but still great to be back.
Great to be back with the camera rolling and the audience aware. All right, so we haven't done a top 10 list in 13 or 6 weeks. So
something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And we're not going to do a top 10 list today. We're going to do a top 5 coaches in NFL history. Our producing partner, Chris Black, is very excited about that. He might have some ideas as to who belongs on this list, and y'all may have some ideas as well. So as always, I've not discussed my list with Talmadge. He has not discussed his list with me. But we're going in order, 5 to 1, top coaches in NFL history. So, Talmadge, why don't you kick us off with your number 5?
Well, I hope you don't hate me doing this, but I'm going to give a couple of honorable mentions first.
Oh, I was going to do that at the end, but you do yours first. Okay. That's cool.
So that'll let you know who's not going to be
on the list.
There
were some guys that were hard to leave out.
But it was hard. The hardest one for me was Tom Landry because I loved the Cowboys back then.
Been some years.
Oh, yeah. Loved them back then, plus the sustained level of success.
Yeah.
Because basically, I think over a 21-year period, they missed the playoffs like once. 5 Super Bowls, plus, again, they were my favorite team at the time. So hard to leave them off. But so many guys have come up since then. Well, not so many, but a couple that have kind of taken some shine off of not his career, but there's only 5 slots. So he's the biggest one. And then probably the one with the most notoriety that you didn't put on there for me would be Chuck Noll.
Oh, yeah.
You won 4 Super Bowls. You ought to be on the list. But again, very, very difficult.
How do you, yeah.
And then I've got a couple more, but I won't name them all. The one I'll name next, though, honorable mention, hard for me to leave off Joe Gibbs. I don't think people realize how good Joe Gibbs was. His teams were always competitive, always consistent. And granted, it was young in my younger life, obviously, but I was like 11 or 12, maybe 13. And Washington was the first team I saw play that when they lost, I was shocked. Because they were so prepared every single week. You could just never envision them getting blown out. When the Raiders blew them out in the Super Bowl, I was just like, my jaw hit the floor.
That was the Marcus Allen game that he broke the single game record?
They were in every game they played. Even if they didn't win every single game, they were in it.
You knew that if they lost, it wasn't going to be by much.
Yeah, and so those 3, I've got others, but it'll take all day. But those are the 3 honorable mentions. But to answer your original question, so my number 5 would be Don Shula. The coach with the most wins has to be on the list. So
be pretty darn hard to leave him out.
He got close to being left out though, because
personally, he's number 5.
Yeah, because personally, I liked other coaches better, but that was the tiebreaker for me.
Gotcha.
Like I like Tom Landry better.
Okay.
But
we're not talking about our favorite coaches.
Yeah, I couldn't ignore the fact that he has the record. So
I got you.
Don Shula, sustained excellence, Super Bowl wins, everything we would want, supposedly. And I say supposedly, I don't mean it like that, but I never met the man, and I was younger when he was coaching.
Right.
So they say he was a leader of men, and that's something I really look at when I look at a head coach.
Well, that's an important quality.
His sons, obviously, not to the same level of success, but several of his sons got into coaching. Just one of the more respected names in the sport. And in fact, I'm glad I'm bringing his name up because even though he has the most wins, as time goes on, these older coaches get forgotten. And when people, you ever notice, he has the most wins, but when people mention the greatest head coaches of all time, his name might come up, but it's not guaranteed to come up.
Like, oh, and Don Shula.
It's not guaranteed to come up. And that's kind of shocking because I don't think people realize the level of success he had over a prolonged period of time. So Don Shula is
pretty
my number
long
5.
period of time, yeah. Okay. So I'll go ahead. Before I tell my number 5, I want to give kind of some baseline for what my criteria was, too, for picking. If y'all been following the channel or if you know me personally, when we talk about players and other people bring up, oh, how many championships, I'm real fast to say, I don't care about that. Are we talking about how good the player was or how good his team was? So we're talking about a player. I genuinely could not care less how many rings they have. I care about what they did as a player. I understand winning the championship is the ultimate team record. I'm not discrediting that. But there have been some great players who have not won championships, so I really don't care. Coaches, you're responsible for the team success. So I am grading largely on longevity, number of victories, number of championships. Now, it's not going to be just, let me get the top 5 wins or the top 5. But those are the 3 big factors. I just kind of throw that out. So my number 5 was one of Talmadge's honorable mentions. It is Tom Landry.
Tough. That's the toughest one for me to leave off.
And there was some I left off that I was like, oh my gosh, like I went back and forth. Tom Landry is my number 5. 270 career victories. He was the Cowboys head coach for an NFL record 29 consecutive seasons. And in that stretch, and Talmadge was very close on his numbers, they had 20 consecutive winning seasons, which is also a league record. Yeah. My goodness, think about that. How hard is it to have a winning record 20 straight seasons?
Well, I'll go a step further. Like I mentioned, I think 19 of those years they made the playoffs. Because there's sometimes you can have winning years and not
be
make
like
the playoffs.
9-8 or something. But
so his winning years meant something.
Right. Yeah. He wasn't 9-8 or 10-6 even.
He wasn't
for
Jeff
20
Fisher
years.
or even, I hate to say it, Mike Tomlin's becoming lately. But
topic for another day. But
we'll
yes,
get into that at some point.
Spoiler: Mike Tomlin's not quite in my top 5. I do like and respect the guy.
I do, and I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to say that as if I didn't respect him.
No, but I know where you're going. At this stage, it has kind of gotten there. Now you said something about 5 Super Bowls. The research I did, I only saw that he coached them to 2 Super Bowl wins.
2 wins, but they went 5 times.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay, I missed what you were saying there. Okay, you're right. 5 Super Bowl appearances.
2 losses to the Steelers and 1 loss to the Colts.
1 loss to the Colts.
Wins over the Broncos and
the Dolphins.
The Dolphins, yeah.
Okay, and he's considered to be the one that innovated the 4-3 defense. Think about what that's done for the league. Every team has used that.
And a lot of people don't know that.
A lot of people don't know he innovated that. The 4 linemen, 1 middle linebacker, weak side, strong side linebacker.
Used to be 3-4, and that was it.
It was 3-4 all the time until Landry. And let's see.
The flex.
Yeah, he innovated some other stuff. The flex plays as well. So I couldn't leave him out. 270 victories. The longevity was the biggest thing where I had to include him. 29 straight seasons, 20 consecutive winning seasons. The 2 Super Bowls are impressive, but the biggest factor for me was his longevity.
Well, and to put it in perspective, Tom Landry would not be something that could happen today, because his first 5 or 6 years, they had horrible records. I'm talking like 2-12. Mm-hmm. I think one year they were 1-11 and like 1-10-1 or something like that. Just years and years of futility. You don't get that opportunity.
No, and in fact, off camera this morning, you and Chris and I talked about the level of patience in today's NFL is just pathetic. It's almost non-existent.
It doesn't exist.
If you don't succeed in your first year or two, and not to get too far off topic, but not only with coaches but players, look what Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold did this year. They were considered outcasts. They were jokes. Nobody wanted them. They're busts. Man, look at what they're doing now. Sometimes the patience has to be there. So anyway, that's my number 5. Talmadge, who do you have as your number 4?
My number 4 is Andy Reid.
Did you hear that, Chris Black?
My number 4 coach of all time is Andy Reid.
If you don't know, Chris is a Chiefs fan, so I had to make sure he heard that.
Andy, easy. I mean, this is an easy one to explain because most of our viewers, if they're watching this, they watch current football.
He's a current,
so they already know.
You know Andy Reid.
But
maybe Chris thinks he should be higher.
But success virtually every year. He's one of the few coaches after he left Philadelphia, because a lot of coaches nowadays, they want to take that year off before they get back into it. Mm-hmm. Not Andy. Andy jumped right back in and bam, instant success.
And the success continued.
Instant success. It's phenomenal, his work with quarterbacks, his offensive background. He's a leader of men. The plays, especially that they design in the red zone are probably the most innovative of all time.
And he's not afraid to try those types of plays where the conventional wisdom is don't do it.
He trusts his players, and I like the way that he focuses on what he's good. I'm not trying to say that he didn't know anything about defense, because obviously if your job is to go against defenses, you know something about defense.
Right.
But he kind of, offense is my thing. He gets a good defensive coordinator and says, you run the defense.
They got one of the best defensive
and they
coordinators
understand.
you could have.
He lets his coaches coach. He's in a strong organization, so obviously he knows how to pick strong organizations.
He's funny on the State Farm commercials.
I wasn't going to mention that, but that is true. So for all the Super Bowl wins, the success at both teams, the development of quarterbacks, just anything you could name, Andy Reid is near the top of the list. I'm glad he's finally starting to get that recognition, because keep in mind, we've always thought Bill Belichick as the coach of this era, and I'm not saying that we don't.
Right.
But at the same time, I think Andy Reid's closer in that conversation
The
than
gap
people
is
think.
narrowing.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, as sometimes happens, we do have an overlap. My number 4 is Andy Reid. 296 career wins and counting.
Yes.
He's still current. He's the only head coach in NFL history that has won 100 games with 2 separate franchises, the Eagles
That's fantastic.
and the Chiefs. As you mentioned, he went from one team to another. The success has continued. Actually, it's grown, because while he led the Eagles to multiple deep playoff runs, including Super Bowl appearance, they never won the Super Bowl. He's now turned that Kansas City team that was already a good team into an absolute juggernaut. They have won 3 Super Bowls with Andy Reid at the helm. And by the time this episode airs, this question may be answered.
Right.
But they may be winning a 3rd consecutive this season. At the time we're shooting, they're going to play the Texans later this afternoon. So we'll see.
And if they do pull it off, not to cut you off, but that might move him doggone near the top of my list.
There's
'Cause
never been a three-peat in NFL history. So
yeah.
Yeah, he's my number 4 with a lot of room to grow, and I'm sure you would concur. So there's no arguing the guy's success. I don't care whether you like him, whether you don't. Matters nothing. The guy has what he's accomplished. Even if he would have retired after the Eagles, he'd be a coach worth mentioning.
Yes.
He's gone on and done more success with Kansas City. All right, Talmadge, who do you have as your number 3?
My number 3 is Bill Belichick.
I thought his name might come up today.
Yeah, I mean, pretty easy to explain. Kind of like Andy Reid. Not a lot you need to say. 6 Super Bowl championships as a head coach, a couple as an assistant coach.
He was a defensive coordinator for the Giants when they won.
Under Parcells, which
Yeah.
Parcells didn't make my list, by the way, which was hard for me to keep him off.
Mine either. That was also not easy. I'll name some other honorable mentions.
And I
later.
see one of yours. I shouldn't be peeking, but I see one of yours, and I can't believe I left them off the list. But we'll get to that when you get to that. I totally forgot about him. But anyway, back to Bill Belichick. Yeah, you can't argue with the 6 Super Bowls as a head coach. You can't argue with the successes of his defense, the sustained consistency. I know he took a little bit of a blemish because when Tom Brady left, he had a couple of years where he didn't make the playoffs, although he did make the playoffs the first year with Mac Jones.
I was about to say, with Mac Jones, they still made the playoffs.
He did make it. So I get it, but at the same time, I think they needed each other. Now, you're saying, well, Tom Brady went on to win one anyway. He did. I can't take that away from him, but that's not going to lead me to taking points away from Bill Belichick.
Right. We're going to totally discredit Bill Belichick because
he didn't forget.
that.
And the game management, he's probably one of the best of all time. That's why, if you remember, one of the New England coach now, when Mike Vrabel, quote unquote, outcoached him in a playoff game, people were shocked because they weren't used to seeing that. So again, Bill Belichick stands alone. Now, I hear, we all see the hoodie and the tough veneer and the short questions with the reporters. But if you see him like doing interviews and doing other things outside of football, he actually has a better personality when you think. But the one thing that jumps off the screen when you watch him is, and it's stupid to say because it's obvious, but he clearly knows football on a different level. I mean, you can bring up
and it's all business with him when he's on the sideline.
And you can bring up a player in an interview to him, and he can break down. I remember 27 years ago when we were playing against them, and we ran this play, and he did. It's just his recall, his understanding of the game, especially defense, is just unparalleled, and then the success is unmatched.
The success is something, just like I said with Andy Reid. I don't care if you hate the Patriots and Bill Belichick. The success is there.
Yeah.
As we sometimes say, Facts are facts.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, my number 3 now is the one that Talmadge said he can't believe he left off.
Yeah, I'm an idiot.
So, this
I'm
guy
an
also
idiot.
belongs.
I'm an idiot.
This also belongs on Talmadge's honorable mention list that he just forgot to say. George Halas.
Yeah.
Some of our younger viewers, current viewers, whatever, look him up because you may not know the name, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He, first of all, is the co-founder of the National Football League.
Yes.
Not just was he an owner of a franchise, which is phenomenal in and of itself, he co-founded the league.
Mm-hmm.
Without the guy's input, maybe the league doesn't exist. We will never know. That alone made me go, that's where I started with my research. When I came across him, I was like, oh my gosh, can I even leave him out? Like, would that just be atrocious? Like, the guy co-founded the league. That's not where I stopped, but that was where I was like, he's a strong contender. He also was the founder of the Chicago Bears.
Yes.
For 10 years, he served as a player, coach, and executive for the Bears, earning the nickname Mr. Everything. That is unheard of, except for the fact that George Halas did actually do it. Player, coach, outside of Bill Russell, is almost unheard of, and that's a different sport. But to also be an executive at that same time, there's a reason no one else has ever done that.
Yeah, and people out there are probably going to say, but it was a different time, easier to do. I get all that. All that's true, but he still did it.
I was going to say, not that I wouldn't agree, but it still wasn't easy then.
Yeah.
There's no way that was easy ever. In 1930, he retired as a player and focused more on ownership. He later would return to coach the Bears. He coached them 4 different 10-year stints, so a total of 40 years as their head coach and an owner. He led the Bears to 8 NFL championships. I think the number of Super Bowls was maybe like 4 because they weren't using that term yet. But league championships.
Yeah, it was a league championship.
He coached them to 8.
Yeah.
Helped create the T formation system, and he set an NFL record for the biggest blowout in league history, a 73-0 win over Washington in the 1940 NFL championship game. I don't know that much more needs to be said. 324 career wins, ranks him pretty high. Co-founder of the league, coach, player, executive, coached the Bears for a total of 40 seasons. Coached a team to a 73-0 win in a championship game.
Yeah, but you forgot the most important part. He's George Papa Bear.
You know what? Thank you, George Papa Bear. Maybe I should have led with that. Halas. But yes, again, some of our younger viewers, you may not know the name. The guy was phenomenal. I've got him in number 3. I even debated, should he be my number 1? I put him at 3, but I had to toy with that. I was like, with those accomplishments,
and again,
I put him higher.
And I'm embarrassed. I just
forgot about him.
Totally forgot.
Well, that speaks to how many great coaches there are. There were some that
and also to my idiocy.
I wasn't going to say all that. You'll find out in a couple of picks. I'm going to say the same thing about somebody I left off. Not that I forgot them, but I almost can't believe I didn't put somebody in my top 5. But man, these lists that's why I love doing these lists.
Yeah.
They're that challenging. All right, Talmadge, go ahead and give us your number 2.
My number 2 is probably where Halas should have gone, but the person I put there is very similar, and that's Paul Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Ties to the Cleveland Browns and originally the Cincinnati Bengals. People forget, and I know we're not doing this, this is only in the NFL, but people forget he won a championship with Ohio State as well.
He did.
As their head coach. I believe he won 3 NFL championships and then 4 championships in the league before the NFL. So if you add all that up.
Professional football,
that's
7.
7, and then
right?
plus the college thing. 8.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of folks that can say that. Then he moved on to the Cleveland Browns after Cincinnati, and obviously was a stalwart in getting that franchise even established.
Yes.
Browns. Now
that.
there is some debate if it was really named after Paul Brown. Most people say it really was, but now there's a story that basically they had a contest in Cleveland when they were naming the franchise. And at that time, the heavyweight champion was the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis.
Oh.
And so some say it's actually short for Brown Bomber, but that's been debunked from what I can see.
Okay, I was about to say I hadn't heard that,
Yeah,
but I could
because
kind of see that.
well, if you and we don't know this
Paul
'cause
Brown makes more sense.
not
to me,
even
but-
in our time, but before our time, being the world heavyweight champion was like being a god.
Oh,
Okay?
it was.
There was a lot more to
like
it than there is now.
immortalized by those fans. Yeah.
And so he was one of the more popular Americans at that time.
That's true.
You're naming a team, so I could buy it more back then than I could now.
Yeah.
But that's been debunked. Most people say it is. No, it's Paul Brown.
Brown's team,
so
yeah.
but that's my pick for number 2. But like I said, in that same era, so I guess Paul Brown is my George Halas, although George Halas probably should have been.
Gotcha. All right, and my number 2. This was so hard. George Halas, as I said, almost was my number 1. He was very nearly my number 2, and you could talk me into changing this maybe. But number 2, I do have Don Shula.
Okay.
347 career victories, still number 1 of all time. Played defensive back for 7 years in the league before getting into coaching. First head coaching opportunity in 1963 with the Baltimore Colts, who he led to an NFL championship in 68. Again, it wasn't called the Super Bowl yet. From 1970 to 1995, he coached the Miami Dolphins 25 consecutive years. I talked about Landry's longevity. Shula's was close with one team. He did lead the Dolphins to a pair of Super Bowl victories. A lot of people know this, but maybe some of you don't. Dolphins still the only team in history to have an undefeated regular season and playoff run, including the Super Bowl. Shula was their head coach. 1972, they won another Super Bowl, I think, in 73. Those are the reasons I have him here. I could make a real good case for putting Halas higher, but...
And by the way, when that happened, they went to 3 in a row.
They went to 3 in a
Yes,
row. They
Dallas
lost
had
their
beat
third.
them, yeah.
Yes. So...
Because Dallas beat them, and then they came back and won 2 in a row. The Dallas.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dallas beat them, and then they beat Minnesota, and they beat who was the other team they beat? Oh, the Redskins.
Was it?
The Redskins.
Okay. So, yeah, 347 wins. Did have the 2 Super Bowls plus another NFL championship. The undefeated season in 72, which has never been replicated. You talked about Belichick. The Patriots were undefeated in the regular season one year, lost in the Super Bowl to the Giants.
Yes.
Eli Manning led New York Giants with Plaxico Burress. No one's done what Shula did and the 25 years longevity. So all those factors combined, I'll admit I could put Halas, I've already said it, ahead. That's why I've got Shula at number 2. The career wins, the undefeated streak, and just the longevity all combined.
And don't forget, he won a Super Bowl with the Colts as well. So
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
The 3 league championships.
Yeah.
All
Well, that's
right.
the Super Bowl, though. It was Super Bowl 3. No, Super Bowl 4, I'm sorry, against the Cowboys.
Did they call it the Super Bowl even
that's
at the time? Okay.
Super Bowl 4.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
my apologies. So technically another Super Bowl. So, all right, Talmadge, we're down to your number 1, right?
My number 1 is who the trophy is named after, Vince Lombardi.
Fairly obvious choice.
I'm not going to say anything more than that. The trophy is named after the man.
And he coached for the Green Bay Packers.
Green Bay Packers.
So some of our fans may not know
And
that.
Washington Redskins.
And, yeah, he did coach them as well.
Not quite as successfully there.
Yeah.
But, they named the trophy after him. I got to give him the
Named
prop.
after him for a reason, yeah. All right, so before I do my number 1, I'll do some of mine that were very difficult to leave off. Talmadge has named a couple. Paul Brown was difficult for me to leave off. Joe Gibbs was a real hard one to leave off. Chuck Noll was a real hard one to leave off. Man.
4 Super Bowls in 6 years.
Yeah, leaving him out was so challenging. So I thought about doing a top 10, but then I was like, we'd still have some that we left off that list too. So
I wouldn't, but
you wouldn't. I probably would.
I'm kidding.
So all those guys, and I'm gonna say my number 1, but I'm gonna first say this: the hardest, and y'all are probably gonna want to spit in my face for this. The hardest one for me to leave out was Talmadge's number 1, Vince Lombardi. I didn't have him in my top 5. It was so hard. He deserves to be in it. I could have put him number 1 like you did.
Right.
A lot of his numbers didn't compare with some of these guys as time has gone on. He didn't coach quite as long.
Right.
The impact was there. The trophy's named after him for a reason. All of that's admirable. He moved into the front office and was an executive with the Packers for a while. So not to take anything away from him, but when I really weighed out, because when I started this list, I was like, okay, is he going to be my number one? Him, George Hallis, who, when I weighed everything out, I was like, if I'm being honest, the accomplishments aren't quite on level with some of these guys. So as hard as it was, it was still hard. He's the hardest one to leave out. My number one, if you've been listening, you probably figured it out by now. It is Bill Belichick. I was never a fan of the Patriots. Back when I was a Kurt Warner fan, they won their first Super Bowl by beating the Rams, and that irritated me, and I still, I've almost gotten over it. But,
well, your Rams beat my Titans, so we're
that's true. 2 years before.
1 yard short.
We hadn't met at that time, but yes, that was Kurt Warner winning the Super Bowl MVP that year. That was one of the best Super Bowls I've ever watched, in fact. But yeah, Bill Belichick, 333 career victories, second only to Don Shula, only 14 short of Don Shula. 6 Super Bowls as a head coach, as you mentioned, 2 more with an assistant. As an assistant, Talmadge said most everything about him. He, the biggest thing for me is the longevity. Once that Patriots team got to a certain level, he kept them at that level.
Yes.
And yes, there's the Tom Brady talk. I will even say, would Tom Brady have been prepared to win that Super Bowl with
They
Tampa
needed
Bay
each other.
if he hadn't played for Belichick all the years of being polished
I agree.
with Belichick?
And I think Tom Brady would say that.
I would think so. They needed each other. But Belichick, to me, had a really great eye for talent. I know the owners have to sign the checks and the coach doesn't get to run the organization. But, man, you look at all, and I'm going to miss some people, but all the players, he knew when to bring in a veteran player to plug into that team. He knew when to bring over a Rodney Harrison or Corey Dillon and plug in. He also developed some guys like Wes Welker and Julian Edelman and some players that you may not have thought were going to be that good. Kevin Falk was pretty successful there. I could go on and on and on. Belichick, to me, did such a great job developing talent, sustaining that organization, and even sometimes trading guys when they were at their peak of draft, trade value. He didn't keep too many players that were
He always got
past
rid
their
of
prime to
players
hurt the
a
team.
year early instead of
That's
a
what
year
I'm saying.
late.
Ship them off when you know they've got trade value and then recycle somebody else in. And he just kept that program going. Again, whether you were a fan or whether you weren't, that was not a factor for me. The longevity, the victories, the Super Bowls, the way he sustained that franchise, that's why I got him as my number one.
I'll say 2 things for that. For me, the tiebreaker for getting Belichick, well, not the tiebreaker, because Belichick would have been in my top 5 regardless. But one of the biggest things I looked at for Belichick and Reed, because to me they were the hardest, because like we've talked about with players, it's always hard to put the newer person in because you've had this
Already
list
got it predetermined.
in your head. But for those 2, one of the big tiebreakers not only were the wins and the victories, but also they did it in the salary cap era where these other coaches did not.
That's
And
a very good point.
I'm not saying the other coaches wouldn't have been great, but I don't know if Hallis would have been able to. It's one thing when you're going to have the same. Tom Landry had the same team every year, and if he cut somebody because he wanted to cut them because they weren't good anymore in his eyes or didn't fit the team need anymore, they never had to go through. I don't want to get rid of this player, but I've got to because we can't afford him. So for me, for them to do that in this era, it means a lot. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap things up is the one coach between the 2 of us that we didn't mention on our list or in our honorable mentions that now that we've got the time I want to do, nobody mentioned Bill Walsh.
Man, he's another one.
And he's there.
I really feel stupid. I grew up as a 49ers fan. He's one that I did think about, and I forgot to mention him as honorable mention. He was kind of a hard one.
That's why I snuck in Parcells earlier because they're just so many.
Yeah.
And I know I said I'm going to name them all, but I ended up doing it. And I was like, well, I've only got one left. So I might as well name
Bill
who it
Walsh
is. And Bill
was
Walsh
a tough one to leave out. You are indubitably correct about that. All right, so hope you all did enjoy the episode. If you liked it, please click the like button. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. It will enable me to continue to give you this type of content as well as many other kinds. Also, if you vehemently disagreed or agree with our list, tell us in the comments. Give us your own top 5. Tell us why Bill Belichick doesn't belong at number 1. Tell us why George Halas should be number 1. Tell us why Bill Walsh should be on our list. We want to hear from you. I want to know your own top 5 lists as well. So for Talmadge Varnado III, I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Hope y'all have a great week and hope I see y'all again real soon. Yes.